is Grandpa.
So that
Grandpa Rafael.
Grandpa is my dad's dad.
Should I start with my name?
Yes, you can go ahead, start with your name.
Okay, I'm Bill Rafael. I'm Liza's grandfather, and Liza was my first granddaughter, and my first grandchild.
This is not his full story. While I never thought I'd be able to capture his or anyone's complete essence in these videos, I thought I'd at least have another interview with him. In fact, he insisted he get a do-over. I only had several days to prepare to film, and Grandpa didn't have all his notes together. I wasn't ready, he wasn't ready.
You didn't show Foster?
We know Foster's here.
But there was no second interview. I didn't have another conversation with him after I left that day. Not for lack of trying, he was just too sick. I feel lucky to have just this interview.
Wait a second now.
Bill.
It's raw and incomplete. It's funny, sweet, and heartbreaking. It's the most challenging interview I've ever conducted. It's Grandpa telling stories.
You're gonna have to go like this with your
He'll wash your face.
I grew up in the Bronx. My longest recollection of childhood was probably I was around 5 years old. I was kind of, I guess we could use the word fraidy cat. And I think this was partially due to the Second World War. You know, you would go to the movies and the newsreels, of course, would show you the atrocities that were taking place. And this formed an impression on me. And did I get scared? Yeah, I did get scared. So that many a night where I should have been safe and sound and asleep in my own bed, I was very, very quiet and timid in my brother's bed. And although he was 3 years younger than me, I guess the comfort of the two of us being there together was enough to get me through the night and the rest of the day and so forth.
So why don't we start with your father and how he came to America?
Okay, Dad came in the early 1900s with very little money with a cousin. They worked various jobs as busboys. Mm-hmm. They didn't speak the language, so they couldn't be waiters. You know, he developed some skills in the kitchen, and found out that he was pretty darn good at cooking. He eventually got a job at the Savern. The Savern at 110 Broadway was a place where the businessmen went for lunch. He didn't get to be social with these people, but he got to know FDR and a few other highfalutin politicians.
Wow.
At the Savern, he met Jim Alexis, who was pretty high up in the ranks there, could speak English very well. He met Jim Alexis's daughter, who was my mother, and the cashier there. They got engaged. In 1936, they got married at, and I'm sorry, but I don't know the name of the church, Liza. But they got married at a Greek Orthodox church. And like I say, they got married on June 14th of 1936, and just about 9 months later, I was born. After that, they opened up what they called the first Kingsbridge restaurant. The first Kingsbridge restaurant was a small restaurant that they opened up in on Jerome Avenue in Kingsbridge section of the Bronx. And he stayed there at the Kingsbridge restaurant until well into the 80s. Worked for a short while after that as a chef at the Riviera Chateau, which was a very nice restaurant on Staten Island. My mother and father moved to Staten Island in January of 1956. Why Staten Island? We always had a summer residence in Staten Island. And so that they felt that that was the best place to go at the time.
And so you grew up going there in the summers. What was that like?
Well, it was very, very nice. But as far as memories, the beach was the place as far as the fondest memories of my life ever occurred. I loved the beach. The beach was ours, you know.
What about a little bit more about your mom and her mom? There's a story about her almost coming over on the Titanic. Can you tell that story?
Our girlfriend that she was coming here to America with got ill, not terribly ill, the day before they were supposed to sail. Where they were supposed to come as steerage on the Titanic, they came as steerage on, I know the name of the boat, but, and I'll get it for you, Eliza. It sailed right after the Titanic sailed. She finally made it here, and after you get over all the trauma and the tribulations of being in America, she worked as a chambermaid in some of the hotels. She went to work for the Knickerbocker Hotel, and my grandfather went to work for the Knickerbocker Hotel, and they got married.
And so your mom grew up in Hell's Kitchen then?
Mm-hmm. Hell's Kitchen in Harlem.
Okay.
I do think I had the address in Harlem upstairs. You know, your dad sprung this all on me. I could have had all of this laid out, and I would have. It would have been perfect. I would have had it chronologically in order and all of that.
It's okay. It's okay.
After kindergarten, I started in Our Lady of Refuge Grammar School Church. Not that I was extremely religious. I did like the Mass, and I did like the teachings of the Holy Catholic Church, and so I was a believer. One day, it just so happened that I was sitting in my father's restaurant. We used to go there sometimes after school, and we'd fool around with the cash register. We'd peel potatoes. We'd do little chores to keep the restaurant going. Sometimes my father and my grandfather liked the job we were doing, and sometimes they didn't. But for the most part, they let us be. One day I happened to meet a guy over there. I'm not really sure whether he was a middleweight or a welterweight boxer. His name was Steve Belois. And Steve Belois told me that down in Mount Carmel Parish, they had a boxing program. And I got into the boxing program, and I did some boxing there.
And how old were you when you did that?
I was about 12. I think I started around the 6th grade. Mom was not too fond of the neighborhood, neither was my father. But he knew he didn't have anything to worry about because all of these boxers hung out down there. They knew that I was his son and they would take care of me. But I wasn't afraid to begin with. As I said, in my earlier days, I was a little bit of a mammy-pammy. I was kind of afraid of my own shadow. But when I realized that if you were 114 pounds and I was 114 pounds, wasn't all that much difference. And I was accepted into one of the most prestigious high schools in New York City at the time, called Mount St. Michael Academy. After 4 years, I graduated. I applied to like 4 or 5 different colleges. Manhattan College being the primary college, only because George Eastman, who was an English professor there, was the track coach, and he liked the quartet of us 4 guys from the mountains. Eventually, I got hurt, and it really didn't work out too well. And that's when I decided that it was time to go into the service. And, because one of the things, my father didn't have the tuition for all of us to go to school at the same time because of the way the business was going.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your siblings when you were growing up? You talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. I was 2 years older than my brother Bob. I was 7 years older than Tommy, and my sister is 10 years younger than me. When we did hang out, we hung out with cousins more than friends. My grandmother was the oldest of 12, and my Aunt Sal was the youngest of 12, her sister. So my mother's first cousins, which would have been Sal's children, were very, very close in age to us. I joined the Navy in August of 1955. I didn't know too much about the various branches, although I did know that I wanted to see the world. I was ambitious enough that I wanted to see everything I could possibly see. I joined Naval Aviation. I became what they call an aerographer. And I was a weatherman for 4 years in the service, coming out as the first class petty officer, obviously the highest position that you could attain, and I did it. I could never see myself as a GI in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to travel, and I was adventurous. And I can honestly say, by that time, I had lost most of my fears.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any fears of going into war and so forth, but I felt that I could have a better life for myself, and again, I could also learn things at the same time. Right after I went to my first A school, they sent me to the USS Antietam, which is an aircraft carrier, which is what I wanted. I wanted a big ship, and I wanted to go places. We were going to go on a goodwill cruise. The United States was going to meet up with the leaders of some other countries and show them things about international warfare, especially anti-submarine warfare. We were waiting around because simultaneously the Hungarians had made their bombing runs. They had this Force for Freedom. They had this big revolution in Hungary, and people were getting out by the thousands, supposedly getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And our next stop was not going to go into Hungary, but our next stop was going to get into the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
We went all the way down Lisbon, Portugal, Cadiz, Spain, into the Mediterranean, all the way through the Suez Canal. Well, this is a lot of years ago now. And our first port of call was Bombay.
Okay.
Now there's problems not only with the Hungarians, but there's problems with the Arabs, with the PLO, and the Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
And Nasser is threatening to close down the canal and all that good stuff. The captain thought it was best that we get back out into the Mediterranean again. We were the last ship to get through the canal before what's his name started bombing it.
Oh, wow.
Different stories, like when I went with my friend Pete Capobianco. He was kind of a shy kid from St. Louis, Missouri, and he said, Raph, he said, you want to go to, he said, I'd like to go see my uncles, but they're about 50 miles from here, from Naples. We drove for pretty close to an hour, and you get a little apprehensive, especially 1956, you go through the countryside, things are bombed out, and we finally got there, and we pulled into the center of the city, and there's nobody. There's not a store open. Every place is closed down. It's no activity going on. You don't see anybody walking the street. I said to Capo, I said, yeah, are you sure you're in the right city? And I came back to the piazza in the center of town, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear, bang, 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 and these bells are going off, and I'm saying to myself, what the heck is going on? Well, it just so happened that one of his uncle's daughters was getting married that day.
Oh.
So now picture this: two sailors sitting on a fountain, and the whole rest of the whole town is coming out of church. And the uncle, like the girl says, and he goes, "Come si chiama? My name is Pietro. Pietro Capobianco." He says, "Yeah, my mother's name is Maria." Well, he gets on the steps in front of the church, and he announces, this gentleman and his friend are from the United States of America, and they came here for my daughter Gina's wedding. Well, they were clapping and dancing. Well, by the end of the night, we were all snookered. I mean, what a great wedding.
That is a really nice story.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story of how you met your cousins in Greece?
Sure. I don't have to tell it right now, do I?
I mean, you don't have to, whenever you want. Whenever,
Yeah, yeah. And, and it just so happened that same day Pete was with me.
Mm-hmm.
He came with me, too, because I didn't go along either. We were good friends in the Navy.
Did you like being in the Navy?
I personally really liked it. I really, really and truly liked it. I thought it was one of the best things a young or any young man could do. Prior to going into the service, I met a young lady by the name of Millie Damiano, and in 1958 we got married. And so my last year of the service, we were a married couple. Well, we met basically from the neighborhood. Millie's cousin, Yolanda, introduced me to her. So when I went into the service, I started writing, and she started, writing back. And I guess it started with us writing letters back and forth to each other, not knowing anything about each other, but we did write letters. I met the captain on the fantail. I was trying to get a balloon up, and he says, "Why are you trying to get this thing up for? We ain't going anywhere." I said, "Oh, yes, we are." So he said, "Who told you?" Because I used to go up to the captain's quarters. So he said, "Where would you like to go?" I said, "I'd love to go to Greece." He said, We knew what the situation was in Greece and how badly they were being prosecuted. There was all kinds of corruption going on. Anytime they had a piece of meat, it was shared. One piece of meat like this was shared between 3 people. So we knew all of this was happening, and there was nothing we could do about it. What does a 6-year-old know other than what you saw on Pathé News when you went to the movie? One of the things that caused another reason for me to be scared all the time is watching the Pathé News and seeing children being dragged by their heads through the streets to eventually be buried alive and killed and so forth. When I did get there in 1956, my cousin Desmina took me to a closet, supposedly a hidden closet, where they had hung out, where they actually hid things away so that they could have them on sparing occasions. Anything that they did get, they did appreciate. They didn't have it good at all because their father was not alive. They had no father. So my cousin Chris, from the time he was a little boy, had to kill to survive. He did a good job of keeping the family together. He was always good with his hands. He was a mechanic. And Desmina had a sewing machine that she did darning and made doilies and all that kind of stuff. They worked through it all, and it was so nice to meet them and get to know them because they were the salt of the earth. There isn't anything any of them wouldn't do for you, and you don't know how you appreciate that until you actually have been there. And that's why when I go there, there's nothing that I can't do that I don't do for them.
And how many times over the years have you been there to visit?
I'm going to say maybe 18 times.
Okay, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The first time that you met them was while you were in the Navy, and they did not know that you were coming.
They were quite surprised.
Grandpa knew how to keep you on the edge of your seat. He knew that a good story always had the right mix of drama, tension, and humor. He also knew when a story worked. The story I think of when I think of Grandpa is one he told me right before I left to study abroad in Florence. It's a story about his favorite meal there. Since then, he's told me that story so many more times it feels like I've known it forever. I recently found a recording of that story from when my mom was 5 months pregnant with me. So maybe this is actually the first time I heard it. Unfortunately, there's so much noise going on that it's hard to make out. And really, it's just a simple story about stumbling upon something great where you don't expect it. And while it's special to me, the message is truly universal, even if it wasn't intended to be. It applied as I started my journey overseas, and 10 years later, it applies as well. Don't be afraid about where a back alley in Florence might lead. Don't worry about where your story starts, because you don't know where it will take you. And don't wait to talk to your family.
And that's about it, Liz, for now.
Right now? Okay. You want to take?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Dad, 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 Dad. Look at the thumb. Where's Dad at?
Okay, Dad, wave hi, say Merry Christmas.